I am Grand Chief Stewart Phillip. I am President of the Union of British Columbia Indian Chiefs. Here in British Columbia, we enjoy unextinguished Aboriginal title.
There are misunderstandings on both sides. There are misunderstandings that should be corrected.
That we're not backwards, uncivilized, and lawless people, and we never were.
They tell us we're Canadian. Tell us we're Canadian. But when we stand on our land,
our territories are unceded.
but when we stand on our land to protect it, we're thrown in jail. We're thrown in jail. We're thrown in jail or charged.
Hello, welcome to Access TV. I'm Molly Caron. On this episode, we will discuss land and our relationship to it, whether it be treaties, rights, or protection. These are all strings of words, and what do they really mean? Well, today we've invited numerous people from across Canada, Turtle Island, to get their perspective. We'll be hearing from Grand Chief Stewart Phillip and Grand Chief Derek Nepinak of the Manitoba Chiefs. We'll also hear from Hereditary Chief Robert Thomas, or Houston, of the Whonnock people. We have gyauustees. He will be representing the Squamish Nation. As well, we're going to hear from some of the matriarchs of the Whonnock people. The Whonnock Tribe reaches on their traditional land from Maple Ridge to Mission, and I'm just learning about them. We'll hear from Cynthia Jim Woods, as well as Lorina Jim. And here to facilitate this discussion, we have Gunargie O'Sullivan. So let us begin.
Welcome to Access TV. I'm Gunargie O'Sullivan. Today we bring you a panel, The Land, Honor the Inherent Treaties, First Nations Governance and Values. What does it mean for British Columbia First Nations? Today we have on our panel gyauustee from the Squamish Nation. Welcome to the program.
Hello, Gunargie. I'm gyauustees of the Squamish from Walsasin and also the Snaimuks and the Channel and Kokwakiwak people. Carrier of the Unity, Peace, and Dignity walking staff.
Beautiful. We also have Hereditary Chief of the Whonnock Tribe, Robert Thomas. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me here, Gunargie. My name is Huston and I represent the people of the Whonnock Tribe.
And we also have Matriarch Cynthia Jim Woods.
Hi, Gunargie. It's good to see you. I am Kwalasawit Shulitkwa, caretaker of the Whonnock Tribe, Kwekwanakwakwelmuk.
And now we also have Matriarch of the Whonnock Tribe, Jossette Jim. Welcome to the show.
Amashgate Nichan Squatchies. Good day, Gunargie.
Good day.
And I am Tsiwithot and Tsiatish. I am the advocate for Whonnock Wakwilmuk. And I also like to add that our mother of Whonnock Wakwilmuk is an elder and she's not feeling too well today. Her name is Quinawit.
And also Matriarch Lorina Jim joins us.
Thank you for having me here, Gunargie.
You're welcome.
I'm also known as Tsiwas and Wayamath. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a video insert of Manitoba Chief Derek Nepinak. Here it is.
I'm Derek Nepinak. I'm the Grand Chief of the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs. I'm honored today to be able to participate in the panel discussion. on the topic of honoring the inherent treaties. I have made it a key piece of my platform and my mandate as the Grand Chief to always put treaty-based relationships and the inherent rights relationships front and center in any of the work that we do, advancing out of the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs, recognizing that there's different perspectives and various opinions on treaty in today's world. We still continue to pursue a rights-based approach to how we move forward in our relations with both provincial and federal governments. It's my understanding from teachings from different elders over the years, but also the understanding that I've received from my interpretation of Canadian law, jurisprudence on treaty rights, that there's items that were specified within the treaty arrangement which really set a foundation for a respectful relationship going forward. There's also items that were outside of the treaty, and what I believe those to be are the freedoms of our people that we always enjoyed prior to entering into treaty negotiations. Those freedoms remain intact, and those freedoms to me represent the inherent rights of our people. They need to be conceptualized as freedoms and not necessarily as rights, because rights have been, in contemporary standards anyway, I believe, adjudicated upon and resulting in restrictions on freedoms, which is what I believe a lot of the treaty rights are becoming under Canadian law and through judicial activism. So when we talk about inherent, we talk about the real freedoms of our people, which were there the day before treaty. So there's a little bit of a difference between inherent rights and treaty rights as I've grown to understand it.
All right. So now that we've seen the video from Derek Nepinak, I'd like to ask you a question, and that is, what are some of the challenges that you, as an individual or as a Squamish person or a Whonnock person, had to face on your ancestral lands?
Myself personally, as a ceremonial leader, running lots of ceremonies, I have to deal with a lot of people who are very disconnected from their heart, who are trying to learn how to be in this world. And it is a very discouraging place to be a lot of times, to have everybody trying to go to school to learn how to take care of Mother Earth.
Must be a lonely journey for you.
It can be, yes.
Tell us more. Okay, we'll come right back to you. Okay. How about you, Hereditary Chief Robert Thomas? Tell us what some of the challenges you face as Hereditary Chief of the Whonnock Tribe on your ancestral lands.
I think some of the biggest challenges that we have are not being able to inhabit our land, not to have any housing, not to have the proper representation. And that all stems back to 1929, when we were wrongfully amalgamated with another community, another band, which of course has taken effect on our people today, because none of our people are at home on their homelands where we can practice our traditional culture.
We also bring you Grand Chief Stewart Phillip. He is of the Union of BC Indian Chiefs and also serves as the chair of the Okanagan Alliance.
The whole purpose and intent of colonization is to dispossess the indigenous people of their lands. The colonizer covets the rich resources within our tribal territories, and in order to take up the lands and the resources, they need to remove the indigenous peoples. And throughout world history, this has been a very brutal campaign of oppression, repression, genocide.
Well, that kind of leads into my next question, which is, how has the Indian Act divided and conquered your people of the Whonnock Tribe? Cynthia, Jim Woods.
There's a number of factors that they have attempted to divide us and dislocate us from our traditional lands. My sisters and I have been attendees at the residential schools, and previous to us, our aunts and uncles have been in the 60 scoop as well. So a dislocation of our people from our traditional territories has been very detrimental in attempting to effectively take us away from our traditional lands.
One of their methods of taking us off the land was the residential school system, which was to literally beat the language, the culture, and our spirituality out of us through the residential school system. But what most people don't appreciate is the real intent of that was part of dispossessing us from our lands and territories. Also, the government entered into a further genocidal practice of removing Indigenous children from their families and placing them in non-Indigenous homes for the very same purposes. Throughout Canada, across Turtle Island, there's been a proud history of Indigenous resistance, and I'm absolutely proud to say that the residential schools was a dismal failure on the part of the government. Our peoples are incredibly resilient, and we're growing stronger each and every day as we reclaim our rightful place in the world as sovereign Indigenous nations, and we're reclaiming our languages, culture, and traditions. Throughout my travels, I am greatly encouraged to see more young people picking up the drum and singing the songs of their ancestors with such a great sense of honor and pride.
What kind of actions are your people, gyauustees, taking to basically take a stance and to counteract some of the attempts to conquer and divide your people?
Well, one of the main things was the acceptance that the policies and procedures were made up, rules and regulations for them, and that the laws of the universe, all of us people are connected through our language, through gyauustees, through the Haichka the Natsamach and Squalowin, the one heart and the one mind that we are connected with Mother Earth. Those, for me, seem to be a key to allow people to be able to have the acceptance of unity within their heart, to have peace in their heart and peace of mind. And then from that point, I've been noticing through the unity, peace, and dignity journeys that we've been able to hold each other up with dignity, so that we can hold each other up high.
Well, this must be problematic when you consider that some people still have their traditional values intact, while others are more influenced by the residential school era foster care adoption and the Indian Act itself.
Yes, my grandfather, he was strangled by the church and the government. My mom and dad went to residential school and to foster homes, and that left me in a place of no parents. Mm-hmm. It left me in a place of no language, no drums, until I started to grow towards the drum. So I started to grow towards the longhouses, started to grow towards the sacredness of our lands, that I started to realize who I was and how I could help.
And are you passing these teachings down to your children and grandchildren?
Yes, and to the other nieces and nephews, and with open arms for wisdom from the other elders and the other relatives from throughout Turtle Island, Central America, and South America too.
Beautiful. Right on. And now, Chief Robert Thomas of the Whonnock Tribe, what kind of actions have the Whonnock people taken to conquer or to counteract this attempt by the Indian Act to conquer and divide your people?
Well, for one thing, we're not a treaty group. We're not a treaty band. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that we have come to terms with is keeping up our practice, our culture, staying connected with our spirituality, staying connected with everything that our land provides us to use, because that's how it was in the beginning. And nobody's going to change that, and nobody's going to change our way of life and how we used to live. And that's what we're passing on to our children, the continuity of learning how to live how our people lived before us. And that's one of the most valuable things that we can do, is to pass it to our kids, and they pass it on to their kids, and so on.
Well, this is what your matriarch, Florence Thomas, has done. I mean, she has 4 generations of family members that she's passed on the knowledge of the songs, the dances, the longhouse teachings and ceremonies too. And so the Whonnock Tribe were wrongfully amalgamated with the Kwantlen people. What have you done about that to this date? What actions have you taken?
Well, I'm gonna let my sister here share that.
Okay. About a month ago, we stormed INAC's office, and we went there to inform them, not to ask for permission, but to make them fully aware that we are the Whonnock people, the Whonnock. We know who we are. We never relinquished our rights and title. We are non-treaty, so therefore that we are not bound by any sort of treaty agreements. So currently we have our inherent rights and title intact, and we do not need permission for fishing or anything.
What were you told once you came to the office? How did they treat you? What was their response?
Their response was they tried to say that they weren't going to meet with us because we were not a recognized band. So basically we weren't registered in their system. However, we know who we are. We know we've always been the Whonnock people. We know, and we grew up with all our values and principles upon our own territories, thankful to our elder, Quinawat, who brought us up with songs, dances, ceremonies, and giving us an immense relationship to the land and the water and all the spirit people as well.
From what I understand, you were told by Eric Magnuson that if you had called prior to, if you had called and asked for a meeting, that he wouldn't have been able to meet with you due to the Indian Aboriginal Northern Affairs policies and procedures. That in fact, if you had not stormed Aboriginal and Northern Affairs, he wouldn't have been able to see you.
Yeah.
How did that make you feel?
It made me feel that we didn't need the permission, that even though he's bound by policies and procedures according to his higher ups, we know who we are, and he needed to be fully informed and aware that we are the Whonnock people.
Well, certainly the long-term implications, as I had mentioned, of the status Indian. We seem to be okay with entering into a process where we fill out an application form and send it to the bureaucracy in Gatineau, Quebec, for somebody else to determine whether or not we're Indians. It follows Indian Act guidelines, which are steeped in racism, which are steeped in gender inequality and gender discrimination. And we've got to figure out a way of extracting ourselves from those processes, because we are the original people here. We have rights to self-identify. Our children have rights to an identity. We have rights that go beyond the domestic character of the Constitution that governs the Canadian nation state. And we've got to empower that. We've got to empower that by being strong and taking forceful positions. So we need to begin, developing mechanisms for taking back our identity. That's a very big piece, and that's a piece I continue to work on out of Manitoba. Through the creation of the treaty identification card, we are now doing a lot of the back-end work to determine how does one become eligible for a treaty identification card, and what are the implications of membership, particularly when it comes to urban reserve creation and the utilization of treaty identity in accessing benefits such as discounts on gas and other tax-exempt purchases. I think that the challenges we face within our ancestral lands tie to a very forceful and oftentimes mean-spirited application of colonial policy, where we're meant to think within the context of reserves and reserve boundaries falling within provincial jurisdictions, and this push and pull challenge between federal and provincial jurisdictions. I think that we have to move beyond that as Indigenous people and reflect upon our responsibilities that we have within our families as individuals, but also from one family to the next, which is really the foundation and the cornerstone of building strong communities. I do believe that within Manitoba, for example, I believe that there's one Anishinaabe people. I believe that there's one Cree people. I believe that there's one Dene people, one Dakota people, one Ojibwe people. I believe that we are a nation that's been divided constructively through the application of the colonial paradigms that come under the Indian Act. And I think that those tools are being used to hold us back in a negative way. I think that the economic model under the Indian Act is used to divide and conquer our collective power, because I don't believe we're realizing it now. And I think that's the greatest challenge we face, particularly when it comes to land conservancy. Deals are being struck between industry and individual First Nations communities that are part of a much broader collective, as I said, of Anishinaabe people or Cree people, just for example.
All right, so how about the Squamish people, gyauustees? What kind of actions have you taken, and what has been the outcome?
I can't really speak on behalf of all the Squamish people and all of the Channel and Kukluk and the people of the Painted Face Societies and our winter dances and potlatch people. But what I can say is that the resurgence of our culture is waking up our spirits, and it's turning our head back into the onboard computer for our soul like it was meant to be. And from that point, we're having a vantage point of being able to be not healing anymore, but that we're able to take the steps to live again, free from all of those laws, rules, and regulations and policies that were put on us, so that we're able to see eye to eye and become more unified and to communicate more clearly with each other. Those are the fundamental first steps that we need to take, I believe, as people, to be unified. Whatever lines that were drawn between us and our people by making us one tribe, when we're distinctly for generations and generations being families with our own jobs to do. And we are all one, but we're not all one through we're one through diversity and not conformity.
I think that it's important to reflect upon, these organizations that have been created, these political organizations, not only the political organizations, but the entire construct of governance or governance authority that's built from an Indian Act foundation. Now, the chief and council concepts in our communities are built from an Indian Act foundation, which gives rise to the regional organizations, which gives rise to the national organization. I do believe that we have a responsibility to look beyond these institutions and start focusing on the constitutions of the individuals again, and giving each and every one of our people the opportunity to learn about treaty, the opportunity to learn about the inherent freedoms that we're born with, and the opportunity to get to a place where our families can determine our own identities again. And those are all processes outside of the current construct. We've got to begin moving in that direction, because the way the status Indian system is set up, the status Indian registry, eventually we're not going to have any more status Indians, which is, I think, the end game, actually, of the Indian Act, is to get rid of Indian people based on a legislated extinction of the status Indian. And I think we need to get ahead of that. We need to project our minds far into the future and figure out today how are we going to take back our identity and wrestle it out of the hands of the colonial systems and structures that have been built and hold us back from remembering our inherent freedoms and our inherent treaty rights.
So I would like to get back to the Whonnock Tribe and the actions that they took when they stormed the Aboriginal and Northern Affairs. What did you come out of that meeting with? What were you able to enforce with Aboriginal and Northern Affairs? What can they do for you? Because you're not recognized within their own policies and procedures. What did he recommend to you?
They recommended to us to look into human rights violations, especially for our elders and the children that were not receiving the benefits. And it was because we were amalgamated back in 1929, we were under the jurisdiction of Aboriginal and Northern Affairs. And therefore, they are bound as a fiduciary responsibility on their part to ensure that the well-being of our tribe, our Whonnock was taken care of. However, a census data from 2000 and 2006 says In 2000, it says minus 56% of Whonnock people upon their lands. And the census data of 2006 said minus 100% of the Whonnock people were no longer on their lands. So they had a fiduciary responsibility to inquire, because they were dictated in their policies and criterias to ensure that our well-being was taken care of, and they have totally failed.
And the Whonnock people, their original territory is Reserve 1, Reserve 2, and Reserve 3, right? And you have the issue of resource sharing regarding the Stave Lake Dam. Can you tell us a little more about this issue?
Well, there's a lot of Crown corporations taking development on Whonnock Tribe traditional territory, and we are at odds and ends with the other community. That a lot of the shares that come out of these corporations is not being received by the Whonnock Tribe's people. And so on. There's been like consequences delivered to the Whonnock people for acting out who they were, for speaking out who they were. And these benefits were slashed, like as my sister was saying, they were slashed. And some of these corporations that are there rightfully belongs into the jurisdiction of the Whonnock Tribe people, not anybody else.
Especially in the case of the Stave Lake Dam. That's on Whonnock traditional lands, your ancestral lands.
That's
right?
correct.
And you're not receiving any benefits or resources or any kind of like opportunity from that land.
Nothing.
Tell us more about the maps. Jossette, are you able to speak about the territory in that regard?
Well, thank you very much, Gunargie, and that. The maps and that are our watersheds. A long time ago, and that our people and that traveled by the water and that, whether it was the Fraser River and up the Stave Lake, and it interconnected our tribes to communicate with each other, or in other words, decided to do some trading. And not only that, whether it came to warring for a little distribution of whether it's trying to get a wife. But our lands and that, our watersheds are actually border lines of existence of where all our people in that roamed around the territory, whether it was to collect the resources of the land, which is the cedar trees and the plants that we have, and also the fishing and livelihood of all our animals. So that's mainly the maps and that just really focus on the just a bare partial of our communities interacted with all our other tribes and around us.
And now you're faced with this having to prove that you are not extinct, right? I find that just bizarre, but not uncommon. There are people from the Gyauustees Nation and the Montagallo people. They have been divided and conquered through treaty and negotiations. You know, the Montagallo people have been deemed extinct. We have the Sinaiaks people in the Slocan Valley who are having to prove that they are not extinct. How can we project a better future for generations ahead of us? How can we make things happen? Let's start with you, gyauustees.
I think what I feel and what I've come to realize for my own self was that when I had received my first Indian name, my real name, which connected me to the land, which connected me to all of the directions, which connected me through the mantra that we speak to all life on this planet. And the realization that I was not the all capital letter name that was registered into Canada, written in black, which is everything written in all capitals and anything written in black is dead. So in that sense, if that's who we think we are, then we're extinct. So rising into the spiritual force of the Indian name and taking a stand on the land that was when my connection really started to grow, so that I can connect with the other people throughout North, Central, and South America.
But will this new terrorism legislation or bill that is being proposed by the Harper government hinder you in this stance that you talk about?
Well, I just accept whatever that they're going to do and give it back to them, as it has nothing to do with me.
Ah, I see. Okay. And how about the Whonnock people?
Peaceful.
Will this peaceful, hey?
No fight.
Yeah, peace. So how will you and the Whonnock people be affected by this up-and-coming bill that is being pushed through by the Harper government, known as the terrorism bill or the legislation?
I'll make it real simple. We're not treaty. Nobody owns us. We've never ceded our land over, surrendered our rights and title over. Therefore, we don't fall under the jurisdiction of the federal government and what the government's initiatives are and what their plans are.
Okay.
Or the provincial.
Or
Or the
provincial. Oh, okay. That's good to know. And Cynthia,
Regarding,
the terrorism bill that is being proposed to Canada?
regarding the terrorism bill being proposed, it's like our CM Huxton says here, we are going to block railways on February 13th and claim our inherent rights and title openly and with humility and with determination, because that is who we are. That is our land. We've always been on our territory, except for the attempts made upon us, genocidal attempts upon our people.
So you're not intimidated by this terrorism bill at all? That's interesting.
No, we're not
Has nothing to
intimidated.
do with us.
No?
Yes. That's
Okay.
anything that devises fear in a people is not a good spirit according to our laws of life. Anything that empowers people, that's a good spirit, and that's what you honor.
But you realize that the shut down Canada will affect the economy for one day, and a part of what this terrorism bill is to stop any kind of action that will affect the economy of Canada. And it's a big risk, that you will be taking, and I commend you for that. But what other actions are you taking, for instance, in a traditional sense, to combat some of the attempts to divide and conquer the people of Whonnock or Squamish? You talked about canoe races, for instance.
Absolutely. We are, I'm not saying we're just basically bringing back our canoes. We have a canoe maker that is aiding our canoes right now, and we're going to bring them out and with a new name, Indigenous name, that binds us all together as a community, as a nation of Whonnock. And also we have an upcoming powwow, Whonnock Traditional Days. It's going to include things like slahal, bone game, powwow, traditional West Coast drumming, and a number of different activities, making our art. We have a number of artists within our tribe, and we want to nurture that and make the public aware of who we are, that we are here, we exist, we are not extinct.
The one key concern for our people, and it's a very holistic and kind of a global view, is quality of life, and how that manifests in terms of activities on the ground that are initiated by community leadership or from those who are outside of community leadership that are not chief and council, is really the beauty of our experience right now. A lot of people would think that quality of life is achieved by going out and participating in a contract to develop the land or to help put the bipole through Manitoba, whereas others believe that quality of life is realized by maintaining language and rebuilding strong families. So we have a very broad spectrum of initiatives. It would be improper to try to say that one priority is more important than the other. but rather to look at these processes as organic and evolving based on a people who are now waking up to a renewed sense of who we are within our ancestral landscape.
Even regarding the minus 100% census of 2006, we are still here. So we deserve a voice in the duty of consultation in whatever goes on in our territory.
But we have people that are like Grand Chiefs who have not been consulted with. I think that it's going to be a struggle for you as hereditary people to get prior and informed consent and consultation. Getting back to some of the actions you've taken to prove that you're not extinct, there was a Whonnock walk that happened. It was called the Whonnock Awareness Walk. I think that you're going to have another one, but you had one in July of 2011?
2011.
2011. Would somebody like to quickly talk about that?
Yeah. When we did this walk, it was the walk that show everybody that the Whonnock aren't extinct. And it was also, I believe it was a walk of hope, right? A walk of hope. And our elder, who's supposed to be here today, she initiated this walk. It was her idea. And us, as the Whonnock, other Whonnock members, supported it. And we walked with her, along with her grandchildren. We did 2 walks, one from Albion to Whonnock, and then we did another one from Albion all the way to Mission.
Okay.
We walked along with our elder. At that time, I believe she was about 67 years old. Well, we had a police escort as well, so it was very formal, and it was also put in a local.
Nothing like a police escort. But on top of that, one of the other things that your people are doing for the elder Florence Thomas is attempting to provide her with housing on her land. And I understand that you are looking for support from the community, whether it be construction workers or people who want to donate money to your elder so that she can build a house on her land. Can you give us some contact information?
Yes, we can. We have a couple of emails. One is cjim@ualberta.ca, and you can also phone 780-614-4946, among other emails here.
You can also contact JOSETTEJIM63@gmail.com, and if you would like to call, it would be 604-792-7911.
And gyauustees, tell us more about the Unity, Peace, and Dignity Walk and what that means to you and how people can engage in this effort.
The Unity, Peace, and Dignity Journeys has been an ongoing run from Alaska to Panama every 4 years, and they run from Terra del Fuego, Argentina to Panama, and they meet with the Condor and Eagle coming together in Unity, Peace, and Dignity, and they share that prayer. The Unity, Peace, and Dignity walking staff is up here in the Pacific Northwest, going to different events and potlatches and ceremonies, and has been going back and forth across the continent to Ottawa, the copper breaking ceremony, suicide prevention, other events have been, this grandfather has taken that walk a number of times across the country. And to contact anything to do with the Peace and Dignity Journeys or gyauustees, you could reach it at gyauustees, gyauustees @gmail.com.
Okay. Well, that has been our panel today at Access TV on unceded Coast Salish territory. This land, honor the inherent treaties, First Nations governance, and values. What does it mean for British Columbians?
I was so greatly inspired by the Idle No More movement, where we saw the mobilization of our elders and our spiritual leaders and our grassroots people right across Turtle Island. And I think it's just the beginning and very much a part of the reawakening of our Indigenous spirit. Of course, we're confronted with the Harper government and its very neoliberal attack on Indigenous rights. And the Harper government is attacking the foundational democratic principles of this country and attempting to, as the neoliberal ideology dictates, to create a market state here in this country. And Indigenous land rights and democracy is simply obstacles to that worldview. The Harper government has been very unilateralist in passing a number of bills that have been designed to erode and obliterate our jurisdiction and our power and our inherent rights.
Let's define some terms. What is unextinguished Aboriginal title and inherent treaty? Bill C-33, Education, gives ownership of schools on reserves to Northern Affairs.
There are misunderstandings on both sides. There are misunderstandings.
Bill C-27, First Nations Financial Transparency.
They tell us we're Canadians.
Aboriginal affairs in Northern Development Canada are under the federal government of Canada, and they chronically underfund First Nations. This same system that is set up to fail First Nations people is the same system that is demanding financial transparency relating to all funds.
We're thrown in jail or charged.
Bill C-38, Jobs, Growth, and Long-Term Prosperity. In reality, amendments to environmental laws account for about half of the 452-page bill. Bill C-38 is much more than a simple budget implementation bill. Bill C-45 affects Aboriginal commercial fisheries, changes navigable water protection. 99% of Canada's waterways lost their protection for navigation and federal environmental assessment purposes. Bill S-2, Family Homes on Reserve and Matrimonial Interests, or RIGHT Act.
They tell us we're Canadians.
The bill has an individual rights or interest focus versus an Indigenous communal holistic approach. It focuses on the best interests of the individual child as opposed to the collective, or the interconnected interests of the entire family. The bill views First Nations people as cultures versus governments with their own jurisdictions or nations with their own sovereignty. Bill S-6, First Nations Election Act. A minister can impose election process without consultation. Bill C-428 could impose sweeping changes to the Indian Act. Bill S-207 could not prevent annulling or destroying Aboriginal or treaty rights. S-212, its fourth attempt, could be possible for First Nations to take on much of the authority currently given to provinces, but no consultation on impact so far. Bill C-51, the new anti-terrorism bill. It extends unprecedented powers to the secretive Canadian Security Intelligence Services to disrupt activities, lowering the threshold for detaining terror suspects, increasing sharing of private information about Canadians, and criminalizing the speech of anyone who advocates or promotes terrorism. On this last point, the advocacy and promotion of terrorism are not defined in the legislation, so it is anyone's guess which speech might be criminalized. Conservatives have previously labeled Canadians actively advocating for the environment and opposing oil and gas pipeline construction as eco-terrorists. So it seems this law could cast a disturbingly wide net. For example, it's conceivable that an activist advocating direct action to protect the environment could be thrown in jail for 5 years under Bill C-51. By giving CSIS itself the power to undertake disruptive activities, the Conservatives are essentially recreating a situation that the MacDonald Commission and subsequent legislation sought to change.
I think that every time that we ascribe to or aspire to be involved in federal decision making, what we're doing is we're playing into the hands of a federal jurisdiction that really can use that mentality or that type of thinking towards effecting whatever agenda they have. You know, government spends a lot of money on devising tactics and strategies and implementing policies that they see will create the outcome that they want for big government. Those processes and those policies do not align with the will of grassroots people, with the will of Indigenous communities.
Lawyers have said this is the poorest legislation we've ever seen. Like, really, who wrote this? And what was the whole reason for it? When I look at C-27, I don't see it about our salaries at all. As much as they're trying to capitalize on salaries, because that's their divide and conquer tactic.
The transparency, it's not about chief and council salaries. Of course, because our people are impoverished all over the country, they're going to react to this.
When I look at this bill, I think of hold the rations, I think of starvation policy, I think of all these tactics that have been happening over the years.
We do have rights of self-determination that are recognized in international law, and we do have to pursue our agenda based on what we know and what we believe to be the best interests of our families and the best interests of our lands. And we have rights protections in place to make sure that that can happen. It's difficult to pursue these things, though, when we deal with a government that really challenges us when it comes to the financial relationship. I believe that they use money to control decision making at every level of the process, and where it makes sense to make provincial partnerships, I do believe that those are vitally important, because we do not live in a bubble. We live in an integrated society, and we need to work with one another, including elected representatives of provincial governments, to make sure that we're making collective decisions for the best interest of all of us, and not just one versus the other. We're all in this together, and we've got to figure out a way to overcome the challenges together.
Here in British Columbia, the most egregious attack on our Indigenous land rights has been Bills C-38 and C-45, which has really completely obliterated the regulatory environmental oversight of large-scale resource development projects, and pretty much paved the way for large-scale resource development projects. The Enbridge pipeline proposal, the Kinder Morgan pipeline proposal, are examples of what the Harper government is supporting through attempting to completely do away with our Indigenous rights here in British Columbia. It's unextinguished Aboriginal title and rights. Similarly, they're attempting to destroy our traditions in terms of caretaking our children and our families through passing intrusive laws such as the matrimonial real property laws that completely undermine our jurisdiction within our communities.
We have no recourse but to stand against the Harper regime, and it's part of the Harper termination policy.
You know, we don't want to administer our own poverty. And that's what they're capitalizing on, is because technically they're not giving us what they have a responsibility through treaty to give us.
But in spite of attempting to continue the neo-colonial constructs through this legislative program, we continue to maintain our sovereign view. We continue to resist the corporations and their attacks on the land itself. And as I indicated earlier, we continue to walk in solidarity with many other human rights groups and social justice groups across this country, as was witnessed through the Idle No More movement.
I think that what we're witnessing right now is the rise and the renewal of some of the old things, some of the old ways. So when I'm asked a question like that, I like to say that, you know, the old ways are looking new again. And I believe that the values and the fundamentals that inform treaty, including the spirituality behind it, the raising of the pipes, I believe that a lot of those principles and those teachings are now coming to the surface. They're informing the lives of our young people. And they're galvanizing as the set of values and the principles that will guide a future relationship that we will have with everybody who comes to the Turtles Island here to call it home. Those values are based in respect. Those values are based in a recognition of the rights to the land. And rights to the land are not conceived of in terms of what am I going to take from the land, but more in the form of a reciprocal relationship where we take responsibility and stewardship for the things we do on the land, and not just a wanton disregard in favor of converting resources into money for somebody. It's much more involved than that. And I do believe that concept is galvanizing in the hearts and minds of a generation of young people in the post-residential school world that we're living in. You know, a lot of us that are entering leadership now, we don't have that residential school history behind us. We didn't go to residential school, but we know the outcomes of it. And we're kind of the living rebuttal to residential school. And in that way, we're becoming strong again.
We're at a turning point in the history of this country, and I believe we're in desperate need of a new vision, a new national vision in this country that is more inclusive, that understands traditional and ecological knowledge and the fundamental beliefs of Indigenous peoples as it relates to sustainable development that has been passed down through hundreds of generations of our knowledge keepers, needs to be the foundation of the new vision of this country that will bring about sustainable development so that we can arrest the destructive impacts of global warming and climate change. And I truly believe that people throughout the world, and certainly throughout this country, know and understand that our treaties and our Indigenous rights are going to be very, very important in forging this new future for all peoples. And I'm just so grateful to be part of this movement forward, this walk of solidarity. I've been blessed with 14 grandchildren. Joan and my wife and myself have been involved in the Indian movement pretty much all of our adult lives. And it's so gratifying and encouraging to know and understand the spirit and the flame of resistance continues to burn strongly in the hearts of our people. Why? Lim Lim.
I've always been optimistic that the teachings and the lessons that I've learned both within the academic context, but also from my experience in working with different elders from different territories across Western Canada, would help open my eyes to the potential and the possibility that we bring as Indigenous people from these lands. I love our people very much. I'll never lose optimism in what we can accomplish together. And that's really the driving force behind the work that I do, is that I have an undying faith in our ability to overcome challenges and to move together by recognizing our values and our traits and our qualities, and the fact that there's nobody else from here other than us. We are unique in our communities, in our ancestral lands, and that's a beautiful thing. That's a beautiful thing to understand.
Our ancestors made that agreement, made treaty, negotiated for all of this for us. And because they did that, we are their future that they thought about. And we have to think of the future generations. We have to honor what they did.
This is about the land. Can you ask yourself this? If we had everything, if we had no homelessness, no people starving before treaty, the day before treaty, what would it like? And where are we today? Nobody in their right minds at the time would have given up everything that we got from the land. The God-given, creator-given right, the inheritance to this land, to where we are today.
Thank you to Gunargie O'Sullivan for shedding some light and inviting all of these guests. What is the situation in your home, in your land, on your reserve? And do you have a concern or a dispute with your territory that overlaps with other nations? Or is there one key issue for your people that you are pursuing? We at Access TV are accessible and want to hear from you. And we are seeking your voice to tell your story. On our upcoming episodes, we will return to our normal format and bring you stories from our community. And I want to thank you for paying attention to all these issues that include us all in this integrated world that we live in. I'm Molly Caron, and we'll talk to you again soon.